What's going on, guys? Guess what? You get to see my pretty little face today. And I've got a really awesome Titanfall gameplay for you guys today. And the reason why I'm doing a video commentary is this is actually a snippet from my live stream. Unfortunately, the audio was just not high enough quality that I wanted to put it on YouTube. That's why it's also in 720p. But it's just such a great gameplay that I was like, well, you know what? I'll just buck up and do a video commentary because I didn't want to have just a random little video up in the right corner. It didn't really match up with the audio. So hopefully you guys do enjoy this. This is probably the best comeback I have ever had on Titanfall. It is a very, very close game, and I just go absolutely nuts. I think I end up getting like 4 Titan kills in the game. So it's definitely a quality gameplay, and I could not, skip putting this up. But you'd be surprised with how many times I've done video commentaries and just video content on my channel. People will always be like, wow, I never expected you to look like that, especially since my Twitter icon is actually my picture. But anyways, let's talk about Titanfall, because recently we actually found out what weapons were going to be in Titanfall, and a lot of people are disappointed because there's not a ton in there. If you look at the weapon list right now, there's 2 SMGs, there's 2 assault rifles, one of them's fully auto, one of them is a semi-auto. There's a shotgun, there's an LMG, I think there's 2 different types of snipers, one's a DMR, one's a bolt action, and then there's a smart pistol. But that's all for the pilots, that's all the weapons the pilots are going to get. And a lot of people are seeing this, they're like, wow, we're paying $60 for a multiplayer only game, we're expecting to get a lot more value out of something we're spending a lot of our hard-earned cash on. And I totally felt them at first. I was like, you know what, I agree with you. This is a multiplayer only game. I expected it to be jam-packed with features such as awesome maps, awesome attachments for your weapons, stuff like that. And then there are going to be 5 different weapons for your Titans, so I guess that's one of the other little, advantages to it, since it is basically based on Titans. I mean, it is called Titanfall. So there's going to be stuff for your Titan, but as far as pilots go, a lot of people were disappointed. And after I sat down and thought about it, I was like, no, you know what? This might be a good thing, because look at some of the past games that I consider to be bloated. You've got Battlefield 4, you've got a lot of the Call of Duty games. They're just too much. I mean, Call of Duty instantly tried to add more and more and more and more every year. It was like they were getting pushed by the consumer to continually add all these new attachments, these new little gadgets, stuff like that. Same with Battlefield 4. I think a lot of people at this point would agree that if Battlefield 4 would have focused on just honing in on the core gameplay mechanic, instead of feeling like they were pressured by the consumer to add all these bloated features that don't really add anything to the game, but they add a lot of problems and balancing issues, I think Battlefield 4 would have been a lot better off, personally. So if you look at some of the shooters that have done really well in the past, some of the iconic FPS franchises, you've got Halo, you've got Counter-Strike, even Modern Warfare 1, Call of Duty 1, Call of Duty 2, all those games were very simplistic. I know Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 1 had a lot of different unlocks towards the lower levels, but for the most part, the weapon choices were pretty straightforward. So I think that Titanfall is actually doing something really smart. They're looking at a lot of these first-person shooter franchises that have all these weapons added to it that just don't really, it doesn't really help the game. It actually ends up hurting it in the balancing standpoint. And they're looking at this saying, hey, we're not going to be one of those franchises. We're going to focus on making a great gameplay experience, which I think is a very smart move. I mean, if you look at the last Call of Duty, it's pretty obvious that Infinity Ward was like, you know what, why don't we tone it back just a little bit? Maybe we should make Ghost not so over the top. Granted, it didn't end up being a very good game, but that's not for, balancing reasons and stuff like that. It just was kind of a boring game. And I think a lot of developers are seeing, these problems with adding tons and tons of content in the game and just not being able to do it. And they're like, that's not going to be us. We're gonna focus on making this game good. And I'm actually really intrigued by this decision. I could see further down the line, they are doing 3 DLCs. They've already announced that. I could see later down the line them being like, okay, well, here's a couple more weapons. And that's probably the smart way to do it. Wait till your game's out, wait till your game's running smoothly, and then worry about adding more features. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, well, yeah, we pay $60. Why should we have to sort of beta test the game before we get more features? And that's a fair argument. But I would argue that if you're playing the game at that point, you would probably be more interested in the season pass type thing anyways, more so than someone who bought the game on release and probably didn't even need those weapons to begin with. So even though you like to get a good value out of games at this point, I think that as far as balancing and gameplay wise, I think this is a very, very smart decision. because I'm a little bit tired of picking up games that just don't run well. I just want a fun experience, and I think that by focusing on what they've got in the game right now, it's going to be enough variety, but it's going to be enough where they can control it. It won't be this chaotic environment. And you know, the season pass has been announced, and I'll touch on that a little bit before this video ends. But keep an eye on the score, because we are just storming back at this point. They were basically to the point where they're about to win, and we're about to triple cap them to take it back. But the season pass was announced, and they said it's only going to be $25 for 3 DLCs, and I was like, really? $25, which shocked me because it was so cheap. You see a lot of DLCs that are, you know, minimum $15 at this point. So even though I'm not a huge fan of buying like season passes, that is a really, really good deal. And if you buy the digital deluxe edition, you can actually get the DLC for $20, because I think it's like you pay $79.99 for the actual game, or something like that. So you actually end up getting a pretty good deal if you do that. I personally am not a huge fan of season passes, but I think that's a really good deal for the consumer if you decide to do that. But it is still a dangerous practice. I don't like, you know, with premium, I don't like giving developers money before we actually see a finished product. But let me know what you guys think about the weapon choices and the season pass price, because I think those are both two very interesting ways to approach a game. It seems like they're taking the value standpoint, and at the same time they're actually focusing on giving us a good game. Because let's face it, I think we've all been disappointed with first-person shooters in the last few years. So we're due for a good, you know, no BS type first-person shooter, and hopefully Titanfall can deliver. But be sure to let me know in the comments what you think about that. Would you rather have more weapons and less balance, or less weapons and more balance? Because I think there would be a lot of mixed opinions, surprisingly enough. But hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Titanfall is only a few days away. This was a really epic comeback. You can see that we pulled off the victory there. But I will see you guys next time. Peace.